when we form images, help us create portals not only into our past, mirrors of our present, but also guides into our future.
A faded photograph feels like 100 years ago.
What is a memory? What role do we as photographers play in creating memories?
Or is it just the way the mind works?
Riding in my Fiat, you really have to see it. 6 feet 2 in a compact, no slack, but luckily the seats go back.
Viewing a photo like this is a photo of me when I was much younger that I'd come across several years ago. It was actually in this format of slide, 35 millimeter slides that were stored up in a closet for decades. The photo was taken by somebody else of me in front of my car that I owned at the time that I was 16, 17, 18. I drove that car for several years. Looking at that photo and preparing this particular talk on photography and remembering and some of the aspects of that prompted me then to start looking at some other images. So I came up with looking at this photo, noticing on the bottom panel of the car is a decal that says Fiat. I added that at some point. And then this other photo here of the car sitting out in a meadow, snow covered out in the forest here in the local mountains. Brings the type of memories, the reminiscing, the nostalgia of times long gone. I haven't had that car forever. It was totaled in a crash. It was parked on the street, and some other vehicle ran into it and caved in the entire side, and the insurance company totaled it. But it was a Fiat, an Italian-made car, and back in the days it was pretty popular, but pretty unique also. There weren't many of them around. Making photos, whether we're in them and we view them and we become nostalgic and begin reminiscing, everything that comes with that, the emotions, the thoughts, maybe wanting things to be the way they were back in those days, or maybe glad that they're not that way. Whatever shows up, viewing a photograph has the power and the ability to do that. As photographers, sometimes we intentionally create photos with a design to pull that. But if we're mindful that whatever photo we are taking may at some point evoke a memory, a thought, an emotion in the viewer, whether it's the photographer themselves looking back, or whether it's some other subject that is in the photo, is there a responsibility to do that? So the rest of this video is going to be kind of teasing out and unpacking some of the aspects of what comes with remembering through photography, through photographs. So looking at old photos such as this helps us to reconstruct our memories of some events long gone. It could be just from a few moments ago. It could be from a holiday. It could be from some social gathering. It could be from a news event. And it certainly can be from times long gone, maybe times where we didn't even exist, but we can look at photos that document something across history since the time that photography was discovered and invented. It's unique for each of us. The meaning that we place to our photos is what the photo represents. This photo is on paper, printed out. I can touch it, I can feel it. It sometimes can be useful for us to look beyond the frame, look beyond the photo. What was going on in the scene around us? What was going on in the moments before the photo was taken, after the photo was taken, if we can remember? What might be happening behind the photographer? So often, we don't get that view. So often as photographers, we don't necessarily turn around and look at what's behind us. What's behind the camera that's filming me here? You as the audience don't know yet. Maybe you will never know. That curiosity that might show up of, well, what's on the other side of the camera? What's the photographer not showing us? Is all important decisions that we as photographers can be aware of, and helps us make us make our decisions as to what it is that we're going to take a photograph of. So there's so many aspects of what's beyond the frame in a photograph. For instance, what might be behind me here may not be immediately obvious in the frame. Yet I've spent a significant amount of time here throughout the last year or so, documenting not only the larger things like the boulder here that's right here behind me, but also the mosses, the plants, the insects that are up along the hillside, and the various fungi. The memory of me creating this photo and this photo. Photos of fungi. At the time that I did it, I was amazed at how small they were, the tininess of them, and required a different type of a lens. But the process of creating the photograph to be able to share it here or elsewhere is, in essence, that there's so much more than just what shows up in the photo. Photographs have a very specific way in which they evoke emotion in the viewer, but also emotion within the photographer. And I'm not sure that there's a clear separation in the two, that if something is pulling a photographer in to take a photograph and then to share it, and then the viewer at some point also experiences some sort of a emotional experience, is there a separation or is it all the same thing? It's a continuation, a continuity between creating the photo and then toward viewing it. The role of the photographer in creating a photograph is maybe just as important, regardless of the type of photography that you might engage with. You certainly bring in your biases and interests, and even the way that you see the world influences the way that we might, as photographers, create a photograph. On what comes into our attention, even to pause and press the shutter on, but also on then later on how we frame it, how we compose it, what we choose not to photograph, the rejections of the scene, the topic, the subject. Most of the photography subjects that I photograph have to do with the natural environment, whether it's these mushrooms, birds, insects, the plants around me, the people moving through the environment. Is there a division between nature and the human experience? These are all questions that I ponder while I'm out making photographs. But sometimes I'll delve into other topics, and some of you are watching may be architectural photographers, landscape photographers, street photographers. This idea of what's affecting the photographer in taking it, our biases and what pulls our attention, whether we're looking at the human experience. A journalistic photographer may be looking for something that involves human suffering, or something that may be a newsworthy event. We press the shutter and click, and we freeze it. We froze it in time so that it then, through memory recall, we can evoke some sort of an experience in a viewer, even if it's just for ourselves, and we never share it anywhere else. The power of storytelling through photography is maybe one of the key aspects that often goes overlooked. Some photographers may not necessarily pay attention to that, possibly that a photo can tell a story, much less a series of photos. So this particular venue right here behind me, Old Mission Dam, the dam is over 200 years old, built by the indigenous people of the Kumeyaay tribes that were living here hundreds of years ago. It's one of the most frequented locations within this park. So often, just me coming in to choose this venue, showing the interaction of humans on the dam now, and there's a story that could be told, whether it's simply me talking to the camera now and trying to talk about what it means to create memories through photographs, or telling a deeper story, one that maybe spans centuries or potentially even eons. That idea of using photography as a way of telling a story can be powerful. One image can tell a story that transcends generations. Not to dive too deeply into how we form memories to begin with, but sometimes it can be useful to have a cursory understanding anyway of the various kinds of memories, the basic kinds. And each has a function for us, and each plays a role then within us as photographers while we're making our photographs. We'll explore that at a different location. I started talking about memory, and I commented that we'd change location and talk a little bit more about it. There are so many different forms and types of memory that have been identified through researchers. There's episodic, semantic, there's even a form of meta memory. But there's also this idea that's been identified by Daniel Schachter. Memory just has to be good enough for us to be able to survive in the world. But then when photography comes in and we're looking at a photo and it evokes an emotion in us, oftentimes it also releases a flurry of memories for us that can be useful for us to pay attention to. Sometimes they come unwanted though, and they can be upsetting, and sometimes they bring joy and sadness and a whole variety of emotions as well. And then we question, where did that come from? So as photographers, when we take a photograph, we're freezing a moment in time, depending on the shutter speed that we're choosing to use, on how long that moment is. But then someone looks at it and it pulls in emotion, but it may then take their memories down this path, down a stream of memories. They may come flowing through like a river, just flowing by. Some may be upsetting, some may be pleasing. We don't know how that'll impact a viewer. Sometimes we have an intention of pulling a particular reaction through shock and awe sometimes, but not always. I'm only about 10 feet away, which is pretty close for these guys. They often don't want people getting that close. Catching a crawdad. So we're just going to do this a moment here. Showing the awkward position. All of this just engaged while we're taking a photo. The odd body positions that we put ourselves in to take photographs adds to the memories that we store, so that when we remember, we can use it as ways of recalling, of remembering. We change body orientation, leaning on things, hard surfaces, rocks, the coolness of the rocks, the moisture that's in the air. It's been sprinkling this morning. This is all here as ways of storing into memories the various types of memories that I've listed. The little guy just caught another crawdad. These types of memories, the implicit memories that get stored into the muscles, and they're not actually stored in muscles. It's in our nervous system, within the neurons. Memory is stored. There's no specific place for a specific memory. Many, many, many neurons are involved in creating a memory. So the implicit, also the explicit. I just swallowed another crawdad. It's doing pretty good. It's having a feast down there. We can bring it up explicitly, declarative, the autobiographical stuff, the story we tell ourselves about ourselves because of the experience, starts to feed into the importance for photographers of trying to get the perfect picture. We struggle. We go through all sorts of shenanigans and contortions to make a perfect photo of whatever that is. And then we tell ourselves later on, internally somehow, that this photo sucks, it's not good enough, and that translates into, I'm not good enough. Things like entering into photo contests oftentimes really pulls that kind of thought process for photographers. When we take a photo and we enter it into a contest and we don't win, which is more often than not for most photographers, and then it's the story that we tell ourselves as to who we are, our abilities, our skills, even our purpose for taking photos. So I'm going to wind my way out of here again. So much of photography is about what we see through our vision senses and how we process it, our perception, our interpretation of it, but also what's involved mindfully while we're taking the photograph. So often what we're doing is we're leaning in, and I know for me personally, I find that I'm frequently holding my breath while I'm taking a photo. The awareness of it can add to, maybe I can use that awareness while I'm taking the photograph, or maybe it gets in the way. In awareness, in practiced awareness with intention of what's going on within inside the photographer's body, and how we're planted on the ground. Maybe we've changed our body position, we've gotten down onto the ground, we've climbed up on something, we're leaning into an odd, precarious position. It's all information that helps us store the memory of that process. And it can, when we do it with awareness rather than an autopilot, something else emerges. Maybe we're creating now a different kind of a photo, a different kind of an image that then may evoke a mindful moment within the viewer.
So as we're nearing the end, I invite you to reflect back on the journey we've traversed so far, where we've explored the intricacies of photography, memory, and mindfulness, and how these three combined, when we form images, help us create portals not only into our past, mirrors of our present, but also guides into our future. And considering the stories that lie beyond the frame that shows up in each photograph. There's so much more than just what shows up in the image. And when we consider that, the shadows and the depths that aren't shown in the photograph, the subtleties of everyday life that are portrayed or aren't portrayed, yet somehow when we're viewing photographs, when we're creating photographs as photographers, we're weaving the tapestries and the emotions that go with being human. With every photograph that we do create, or that we do view and hold and have in our collections, they're more than just images. They're historical narratives, I guess, that come with every shot. There's a story that goes with every shot, every picture. And I think that's important for us to remember. So I'm urging each of you out there to find some personal connection to the photographs that you make or to the ones that you view, and seeing them as a shared human experience. And finally, thank you. Thank each and every one of you for joining me on this journey and this exploration of memory and photography. And if you found any value in this whatsoever, I invite you to click the like button and subscribe. And share your experiences here at Sing to the Mountain. So until next time, continue exploring, staying curious, and making photos. And be well.
Those summer